anything can happen at any time. There was nobody who looked like me doing it. Producer princess, let's go, let's just focus on production. Probably the biggest reason why I enjoy Mouse as a character. Let's just put absolutely everything I have into this project.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the Kilohearts channel. George here, and today a very special guest. We're joined by Mouse, Bristol-based producer, a musician, sound engineer, sound designer. Mouse, hello, nice to see you.
Hello, always a pleasure. How are you?
I'm really well, yes. How are you?
Good, I'm well too.
It's great to have you here. You are the author of recently released content bank Candy Milk. And maybe we could start by discussing that a little bit. What's the deal with the content bank? What are the theories behind it? Where did you come up with the ideas and so on?
Wow, that's a great question. It was firstly so much fun to put together. And I think that what Candy Milk really encompasses is how non-specific pop can be, if that makes sense, because there are so many different sounds and different variations and styles, I guess, in there as well. It's really diverse, it's very varied, and there are so many different instruments involved as well. In terms of the actual creation of it, it took quite a long while to kind of decide what direction I wanted to go in, because pop, like I said, it can be so expansive, and it's almost, it's quite subjective really, what is pop and what's not, particularly as people's influences just change with time and culture, and as society shifts we have so many different influences to work with, and what was pop kind of, it changes all the time. But I had so much fun going back to what pop was for me when I was a kid, and thinking about, like, we've got the harpsichord in there, it's very NSYNC, thinking about like artists and bands that I really enjoyed when I was a child, that kind of opened my mind to what pop is and what it can be, and how much fun and exuberance that pop has. And I really hope that I've captured that with Candy Milk, because that was definitely what I was exploring when I was making it.
Absolutely. Do you think pop is necessarily tied to childhood, youthful exuberance? Do you think there's a way to sophisticate pop in adulthood, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think it's really important when you're creating anyway to really let your inner child go for it, because I think that's how we connect to our true creative inspiration and creative energy. And I think oftentimes if you get bogged down by the adult seriousness of life, you might not create in the most authentic way, or at least that's what I've experienced anyway. I certainly do think that there are so many artists that I can think of now who have grown up with a fan base. I think of Taylor Swift, for example, and she's managed to kind of engage a fan base throughout her growing up from her teens to her, I think she's in her 30s now. And I love that pop can change and transition and grow with the author and the creators as well. I think another example of someone who's doing it fantastically is Billie Eilish. She makes pop that is, I mean, she's a teenager, but it can be quite serious and dark, and pop can go there as well. I think there's something magic, though, about the early noughties and late 90s, which is kind of my era of pop. And perhaps young millennials can also agree with me on that one. There is an element of magic, an element of girl power that era really, really brought. And yeah, it's just so much fun. So I don't know. To answer your question, I think that pop can be anything you want it to be. But for me, as a young millennial, it's got to be that iconic Britney, Spice Girls, all of those real greats. And
it certainly comes through in the bank. It's exciting to hear those sounds bubbling up in a new form.
I'm really pleased.
Yeah, let me ask a couple of questions about you in general as a musician, as a producer. How would you describe yourself? What's your mission statement, if you like, as an artist, as a producer, as a sound designer?
That's another great question. My mission statement, I think I have a few, if that's not too ambitious, but one of them I think that's really important to me is when I was a teenager and I first got onto YouTube and I first discovered music production, I noticed that it was all men doing it. And I was so interested and fascinated by the topic, but there was nobody who looked like me doing it. And I suppose my most important mission statement is to kind of show other people similar to me that it's for you as well. So that's really important. But I think for me, in terms of my artistry, it is mainly to allow myself and others who want to come along with me a journey to kind of reconnect with that inner child, with that fun nature that the serious adult world can oftentimes encourage us to forget and disconnect from even. So my music is oftentimes very playful. And that's probably the biggest reason why I enjoy Mouse as a character, because she is a more confident and out there version of who I am as a person in my daily life. So it's fun to get to play with a new character, and that's kind of how I view it as well.
Now, we at Kilohearts, we first met you through She Knows Tech and got to know you and your work. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got in touch with them to begin with?
Yes, that was a fantastic introduction to you and to Kilohearts, was through She Knows Tech. And that was actually through a producer friend of mine, someone who I've collaborated with before, a producer called Anki, who's also Bristol-based. But he actually DM'd me a link to the She Knows Tech course, which is the collaboration that they did with Kilohearts, sorry. And he said, I think you should do this. I think this will be good for you. And I was like, oh yeah, might as well give that a go, see what happens. And essentially it was a course open to women based anywhere to get involved with sound design. And it was led by an artist and educator called Elisha, who is based in the US. And she was giving us a kind of ground up tuition speed run, because I think it was an 8-week course on everything sound design, which was incredibly eye-opening, because I had tried so many times in the past and just couldn't get my head around it. But having that sort of safe space to ask whatever questions we wanted was fantastic. I think there were a couple of British producers alongside myself, but mainly a lot of women in the US, which was great to be able to connect with people too, because I didn't know, I still don't know many female producers really. But She Knows Tech is a really great organisation that do a lot of work with making sure that women know that this is a space for them.
Yeah, I really don't want to put words in your mouth on this stuff, but do you think that the networking and the social side of the industry is a reason why there aren't so many female or non-male producers out there? It seems to be very male-dominated. Do you think that the social aspect of things is a part of that?
Definitely. And I think conversely, almost the lack thereof as well, because I think many of us experienced throughout the pandemic working remotely. I know I did. I personally suffered with loneliness throughout the pandemic. And as producers, if we're not in studios and not doing studio work like that, we're oftentimes in a room like this and we're alone. And it can be very difficult to have that connection and that community around the work we do. And I think that from my experience, I've had to really try to seek that community. And it's been very important to me when I've done that, and I've been able to have people that I can ask questions and just chat to as well throughout the day about what I'm up to, and share achievements as well, and be able to celebrate what you've been doing and what you've been working on. I think that, yes, it can be very intimidating if you don't have that community support and you are looking to get into it, because if you go on social media, you go on YouTube, oftentimes you will see a lot of men working on tracks, and that can be quite common. So it's even more important, I think, for the women who are doing it, and everybody who doesn't identify as male, who is doing it and who's working in the production space in some regard, to be as as kind of vocal about it as they're comfortable being, because I think it enables other people to see themselves, oh, maybe I could do that too. That's certainly how it's been for me. And when I found She Knows Tech, it was like, what? There are more of us? Amazing. Let's get involved. I can't not get involved with that. So yes, I do think that is, it's a very difficult thing, a lack of community, but there are communities there. There are pockets of people there, and those communities are rich and supportive.
And I always find when you get together with the right people at the right time, with the right gear in the right place, it's symbiotic. Things grow out of the circumstances. Has that been your experience too, that sometimes you don't choose the right elements, but once you find them, things happen?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, taking that She Knows Tech course as an example, I think it's a great example for me. I'm really fortunate that course has led to a relationship with Kilohearts, and it's led to Candy Milk existing and things like that. And if I hadn't had thought, okay, I'll give that a go, and maybe that's for me, and then those things wouldn't exist. So absolutely. I think sometimes you just have to not think too far ahead of really what's the outcome of this, and just go for it and just see where you end up and what happens.
Let me ask you a bit about gear and tools and equipment and software and stuff. What do you look for first and foremost when you're choosing the tools of your trade? Is it price? Is it ease of use? Is it sound quality?
Oh, I would be lying if I said it wasn't price. I wish it was. I wish that wasn't true even. I wish that it was something a little bit more sophisticated. But no, that is true. I do think, though, you can get some incredible tools that aren't that expensive. We were, just before we started this call, we were talking about the microphone I'm using today. I'm using an Aston Origin. I think it was like sub £150, but it's such a fantastic vocal mic. So you can get some really amazing stuff. I don't remember that being the case when I first started out at all. I remember, or at least it felt at the time, like I was shelling out a lot of money, being like, hey, this is what everyone uses, so this is what I should be using. But I think it takes a bit of time to kind of find your stride and kind of find what works for you. In terms of like software, probably just general usability. I would say that looks and the aesthetics of what I'm working with do come into it a little bit, but also not too much. I think that I've worked with a couple of synths before that have been extremely complex, and just kind of the way that, for example, Faceplant is complex, but everything is in folders and everything is organized. That to me is more important than everything being on show and all the capabilities are all there and it's all a bit much and a bit intimidating. Being able to kind of discover things that, capabilities of software and things as you delve more and more further into it, like you can with Faceplant, that's what I enjoy doing, because it means that the parts of it you actually use, you've really considered and you have an intention of why you're going to use them. So I really enjoy that. I wish it wasn't budget, but it is budget.
When it comes to value for money, though, right, here's a question. How do you approach choosing what you're going to spend a limited budget on as a creator, as a professional, when you have a choice between infinitely expensive, cool things? How do you choose where to invest, I guess?
That's a really good question. Recommendations from friends. I think that I trust the people that I trust my kind of musical peers and their opinions. And that's, again, why community is so important as well. Because there are so many different products on the market for every aspect of music production, really. It's so important, I think, for me to have somebody I can go to and be like, oh, have you used this? What do you think of this? Is this better than this? Or whatever it might be. That's been really, really helpful.
And because I know you play bass as well as sound design in synths, for example. So if there's a nice shiny new bass guitar or a new software suite and you kind of have to choose between the two, do you have a means of figuring out what's important to you? Is it on a project by project basis? You know what is coming up for you, so you know where to funnel your resources? What's the situation for you?
Yes, it's definitely, I think since the pandemic anyway, it's definitely been a project by project basis, because I think pre-pandemic, I would have told you my 5-year plan, maybe even a 10-year plan. I would have been so incredibly organised, which I think there's merit in that, and I still live like that to some extent. However, now I know that anything can happen at any time, particularly when it comes to the music industry and the live industry in particular. I can't be that long term anymore, or perhaps I can be now, but I think, yeah, post pandemic it's a bit frightening to think about long term stuff sometimes. That's my experience anyway. So I think for me at the moment it's definitely project by project basis. Having said that, though, going back to software and music production tools, I do think that once you have a fairly decent microphone, I use Logic, so I have a pretty good array of like stock plugins that are all really good. I think Logic is fantastic with that, and I'm sure the other DAWs are as well. You don't actually need to buy as much as you probably think, and I think that that's perhaps the trap that I've fallen into in the past.
Yeah, I think it can be very tempting to get something new to get the creative juices flowing, and sometimes it really works, and other times you end up with a nice big white elephant on your desk or your desktop, and figuring out where to funnel the resources can be the difference between a really inspiring journey and a creative block, I find.
Totally. I think when it comes to those expensive plugins and things like that, I will always wait for a sale, always, because it always comes around. You might have to be a little bit patient, but yeah, nothing stays full price forever. So I always wait, and then if I really want it by the time it's come on sale, then I'll probably buy it if I can, because I've waited. So it kind of means that little bit more.
That's wonderful. Let's talk a little about your 5-year plan then, if it is in tatters or if it's just changed a bit, or if you just don't want to think that far ahead. What's the situation in terms of your future planning now?
That is a great question. I wouldn't say it's completely in tatters, but I would say it is more open to change, and I'm more flexible than I used to be, thanks to the pandemic, which I think is a healthy thing, actually. Prior to the pandemic, I was very rigid, and if things didn't go the way I anticipated they would, then I'd be like, well, what to do now? Like, I can't do that, so back to the drawing board. Whereas now I allow myself a bit more time to kind of for changes to happen, because they inevitably do. For me this year, I have been very much producer princess. Let's go. Let's just focus on production. Whereas in 2023, I have so many new tracks that I want to get out, and I'm so excited about that, because it's been a long time since I've actually released any new music. So that's my main goal, I think, for the next year. I'm not sure about the next 5, but the next year I definitely do want to put out a lot more music, because I've been sitting on a lot that I just haven't had the time to really consider putting out properly. So that's the next thing.
Excellent. So should we expect lots of new singles, or will you be collecting them for an LP release, or?
It's a great question, because I put out an EP in 2021. And because it took so much of my energy and my resources at the time and my time, I did think, I don't know if I'd do this again as an independent artist, because this is a lot. I think because I wasn't working thanks to the pandemic. So it was like, let's just put absolutely everything I have into this project. And I really did pour myself into it, but to the point where I was creatively exhausted afterwards. I had nothing left to give. And I think it's taken me a really long time to kind of replenish that and feel like I can put new music out again. What was your question? Sorry.
I was asking about singles versus EPs and LPs. Is there an obvious right answer for you going forward? It sounds like you're leaning more towards singles.
Yeah, I think so. I have written what I would say is an LP. But I haven't done any of the production. I'm talking just melodies, lyrics, and chords. And I think it makes sense as a succinct project. Like it works together. However, I don't know if I would put anything out as an LP at this point of my career. I think it makes more sense strategically to just keep doing singles at the moment. And in that way as well, you can kind of stretch out all of the things that you want to release and the things that you want to say. And I think that's important in terms of your endurance when it comes to being an artist, because it can be really consuming. So I think that for me is what makes most sense.
It sounds very sensible to me. Yeah, wonderful. I think we'd better leave it there, but I wanted to ask, is there somewhere people can find out more about you? Is there a website or some social media people can find you on?
Absolutely. It's at She's Called Mouse on Instagram and YouTube, because YouTube have handles now, so that's quite cool. It's shescalledmouse.com as well, but I'm most often on Instagram, or you can find me on YouTube as well.
Fantastic. And links in the description, of course. Cool. So it's Candy Milk is the name of the content bank. Mouse is the author of the content bank. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks so much for coming and having a chat.
And you, thank you for having me.
Catch up with you soon.
Bye.